The harsh lights of Crestwood Academy bounced off polished floors as 14-year-old Timothy "Tim" Abernathy shuffled through crowded hallways. He'd become adept at dodging notice during his 6 months there. Standing at 5'4", slender, with thick glasses perpetually sliding down his nose, Tim had perfected the art of blending in. His sandy blonde hair often fell across his face, and his clothes, practical but utterly unfashionable, made him an easy target within the school's rigid social structure. Moving from Atlanta to this quiet Oregon town was his mother's way of escaping bad memories after his stepfather passed away. But for Tim, it felt like exile. He avoided eye contact, spoke softly, and had largely managed to avoid trouble until today. "Well, looky what we got here," a booming voice announced, instantly knotting Tim's stomach. Rick, the Hammer. Hamilton, the school's hockey star, swaggered into Tim's path. Towering at 6'3", with a build like a brick wall and the air of someone used to getting their way, Rick radiated dominance. His two shadows, Doug the Thug Peterson, a hulking football player with a shaved head and a sneer permanently etched on his face, and Kyle the Snake Swanson, a wiry kid with darting eyes that seemed to enjoy only others' suffering, flanked him. Tim tried to slip past, but Rick blocked his way. "Hold on there, bookworm. We're just being neighborly." His smile was cold and humorless. "You've been at Crestwood for, what, half a year now? And you haven't properly introduced yourself yet." "I'm late for English," Tim mumbled, nervously adjusting his backpack. He felt eyes turning towards them, students anticipating the spectacle of someone else's misfortune. "Oh, he talks," Doug guffawed, a rough, grating sound. "We thought you were some kind of mute. Besides being blind as a bat, I mean." He flicked Tim's glasses, sending them tumbling to the floor. Tim knelt to retrieve his glasses, his jaw tight. What they didn't know, what no one at Crestwood knew, was that Tim Abernathy had spent the last 6 years studying Taekwondo under Master Choi, a renowned instructor from Seoul. He'd started at age 8 after being relentlessly teased at his old school, and his natural coordination, coupled with intense dedication, had transformed him into a formidable fighter, a skill hidden by his unassuming appearance. But Master Choi's words echoed in his mind. True strength is not using strength. A wise man avoids fighting, not starts it. His mother's voice joined the chorus. "This is a chance to start fresh, Timothy. Leave the past behind." So Tim endured. Each shove in the hallway, each accidental elbow to the ribs, each whispered insult about his clothes. He absorbed it, using the breathing techniques and mental focus he had learned. "Look at him, just standing there," Kyle hissed, stepping closer. "I bet he's never thrown a punch in his life, probably runs home crying to his mama every day." The bell rang, giving Tim the excuse he needed to dart around them and dash towards his English class. He heard their laughter echoing behind him, mingling with the general noise, but he forced himself to walk steadily, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him run. In class, Tim took his usual seat in the back row, far enough to avoid attention. He opened his textbook and tried to concentrate on Mrs. Davison's lecture on Shakespeare, but his mind kept replaying the morning's encounter. He felt that familiar sting of humiliation, the same feeling that had led him to Taekwondo in the first place. The harassment continued throughout the week. Rick and his goons seemed intent on making Tim's life miserable. In the lunchroom, they would deliberately trip him as he carried his tray, sending his food splattering across the floor while other students hooted with laughter. In gym class, Tim became their favorite target in dodgeball. The rubber balls hurled at him with excessive force and suspicious aim. The worst was Friday after school, when they trapped him near the bike racks. Most students had already left, and the parking lot stretched empty and silent. "Hey, Timmy," Rick called out, his voice echoing in the empty air. "We've been thinking about you all week. You seem lonely, buddy, like you need some friends." Tim continued unlocking his bike, his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm fine, thanks." "See, that's what I mean," Doug sneered, moving closer. "You're too nice, too soft. This is America, dweeb. You gotta toughen up if you want to make it." "Yeah," Kyle added, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe we should help you with that. Give you some character-building exercises." Before Tim could react, strong hands grabbed his arms from behind. Two seniors he recognized from the football team materialized, clearly part of a pre-arranged plan. They held his arms while Rick stepped forward, grinning. "Here's lesson 1 in toughening up," Rick said, drawing back his fist. "Sometimes life slaps you when you least expect it." The punch landed square in Tim's chest, knocking the wind out of him despite the restraining hands. Pain exploded through his chest, but what hurt more was the calculated cruelty of the attack. This wasn't random bullying, this was deliberate torment. "Lesson 2, Doug said, taking his turn to deliver a blow to Tim's stomach. "Nobody's coming to save you. You either save yourself or you get crushed." Tim's breathing remained steady despite the pain. Master Choi had taught him to absorb blows, to breathe through pain, to maintain focus under pressure. But more importantly, he was analyzing his attackers, their stances, their grip, their clumsy attempts at fighting. He could disable any of them in seconds, using techniques he had mastered years ago. But his grandmother's words echoed in his mind, joining Master Choi's. "An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, grandson. Be better than those who hurt you." So Tim endured. When they finally released him, laughing and slapping each other on the back as they walked away, he remained bent over his bike, not from pain, but from the effort it took to control his response. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with the suppressed power struggling to be unleashed. That weekend, Tim spent countless hours in his garage, practicing forms on the worn punching bag his mother had bought for him. Each strike was precise, controlled, devastating. His movements were fluid, his technique polished enough to make his former instructor proud. But with each kick and punch, he reminded himself why he couldn't use these skills at school. Monday brought a new wave of abuse. Word had apparently spread about Friday's lesson, and Tim found himself targeted not only by Rick's gang, but also by random students trying to impress their friends by picking on the easy target. His books were knocked out of his hands at least 5 times that day. Someone smeared peanut butter on his locker during history class. In the cafeteria, a group of cheerleader girls loudly mocked his appearance, speaking just loudly enough for him to hear every word. But it was Tuesday that changed everything. Tim was in the boys' locker room during lunch, washing his face and trying to steel himself for the afternoon, when the door crashed open. Rick, Doug, and Kyle stormed in, accompanied by 2 other football players Tim didn't recognize. The look in Rick's eyes was different today, colder, more menacing. "Well, look what we found," Rick sneered, his voice echoing off the bare walls. "Having a little cry in private, Timmy?" "I wasn't crying," Tim said softly, turning to face them. The locker room suddenly felt claustrophobic, with 5 large bodies blocking the exit. "Sure looked like it from here," Doug said with a smirk. "Maybe we should give you something to really cry about." Before Tim could respond, hands grabbed him again. But this time was different. This time, they dragged him towards the showers at the back of the locker room, their intentions becoming horrifyingly clear as they shoved him against the cold tile wall. "Welcome to Crestwood, freak," Rick sneered, turning on the water. "Time for a little rinse." The icy water blasted Tim's face, stealing his breath. They held him there, pinned against the wall, water streaming down his face and soaking his clothes while they laughed. The humiliation was complete, absolute, crushing. But as they finally let him go, water dripping from his hair and blurring his vision, something snapped inside Tim Abernathy. 6 years of discipline, 6 years of Master Choi's teachings about restraint and self-control, 6 years of being told that true strength meant avoiding conflict, all of it coalesced into a single, searing moment of realization. Sometimes you had to fight back. Next time, maybe you'll learn to show some respect, Rick was saying, pushing Tim towards the benches. This is what happens to losers who don't know their place. Tim stood slowly, water cascading from his hair, his glasses askew. He looked at his reflection in the steamed-up mirror, really looked, and saw not a victim, but a warrior who had been hiding his true strength for too long. He turned to face his tormentors, and something in his demeanor made Doug take an involuntary step back. "What's with you?" Rick demanded, clearly sensing the change as well. "You look different, like you suddenly grew a pair or something." "Maybe I did," Tim said softly, removing his glasses and placing them carefully on a nearby bench. Without them, his dark eyes seemed sharper, more focused. "Maybe I'm done pretending to be someone I'm not." The five boys exchanged glances. Kyle laughed nervously. "What's that supposed to mean? You gonna take on all five of us, four eyes?" Tim didn't answer immediately. Instead, he adopted a stance that felt as natural as breathing, feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced, hands relaxed, but ready. Years of training had made the position automatic. "I'm giving you one chance," Tim said, his voice carrying a quiet authority that silenced the locker room. "Walk away now, and we can forget this ever happened." Rick's face flushed red. "Are you threatening us? You little twerp, I'll—" He lunged forward with a clumsy, telegraphed punch, the kind of sloppy attack that Tim had been trained to defend against since he was 8 years old. Time seemed to slow as Tim's body reacted with muscle memory honed by countless hours of practice. A simple block with his left arm deflected Rick's punch harmlessly, while Tim's right foot shot out in a perfect sidekick, connecting with Rick's ribs with pinpoint accuracy. The hockey player's eyes widened as he gasped for air, clutching his side. He stumbled backward, doubled over in pain. The other four stood frozen in shock for a moment that stretched into an eternity. Then Doug roared and charged forward, followed by Kyle and the two football players. What followed was a display of fluid, controlled martial arts. Doug swung a wild haymaker that Tim ducked under easily, spinning around and delivering a back fist that sent the football player staggering into the lockers. Kyle tried to grab Tim from behind, but a quick elbow strike to his nose and a leg sweep sent him crashing to the floor. The first football player, a lineman who outweighed Tim by at least 80 pounds, tried to use his size, grabbing Tim in a bear hug from behind. Tim lowered his center of gravity, hooked his leg behind the lineman's, and executed a perfect hip throw, sending the larger boy flying over his head to land with a thud near the showers. The last attacker hesitated, glancing at his fallen comrades, then wisely decided to flee, scrambling for the door. Tim stood in the center of the locker room, his breathing calm and even, surrounded by 4 groaning, defeated bullies. Rick was still gasping for air, his face pale. Doug was slumped against the lockers, a dazed expression on his face. Kyle was curled up on the floor, clutching his nose. The lineman was lying near the showers, looking bewildered. 6 years, Tim said softly, more to himself than to them. 6 years of Taekwondo. Master Choi always said true strength is knowing when not to fight. He retrieved his glasses, sliding them back onto his face with steady hands. But he also taught me that there comes a time when not fighting becomes a form of weakness. He looked down at Rick, who was finally catching his breath. "You wanted to teach me lessons about toughening up, about how life slaps you when you least expect it. Well, here's a lesson for you. Don't pick on people when you have no idea what they're capable of." The locker room door opened, and Coach Johnson, the gym teacher, walked in. He surveyed the scene. 4 students in varying states of distress, one standing calmly in the center, and his jaw dropped. What in the world happened here? The story spread through Crestwood like wildfire. By the end of the day, everyone knew that Tim Abernathy, quiet, nerdy Tim Abernathy, had single-handedly defeated 4 of the school's biggest bullies in the locker room. The tale grew with each retelling, but the central facts remained. The kid no one noticed was a martial arts expert. The disciplinary hearing was held the next morning. Principal Davies sat behind his desk, looking grim as he reviewed the statements. Tim sat quietly, his hands folded in his lap, while his mother sat beside him, her expression a mixture of worry and pride. "Mr. Abernathy," Principal Davies began, "while I understand you were defending yourself, fighting on school grounds is a serious offense, regardless of the circumstances." "I understand, sir," Tim replied calmly. "However," the principal continued, "witnesses have described a pattern of bullying and harassment leading up to this incident. The shower attack in particular was unprovoked and, frankly, appalling." He glared at the four boys sitting across from him, all sporting various bruises and looking far less confident than they had the day before. "Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Swanson, and Mr. Carter, you are suspended for 3 weeks. When you return, you will be on probation for the remainder of the year. Any further incidents and you will face expulsion." His voice was stern. "What you did in that locker room was not just bullying, it was assault. Be thankful Mr. Abernathy's mother is not pressing charges." He turned back to Tim. "As for you, Mr. Abernathy, 2 days of in-school suspension for fighting, despite the circumstances. But I want you to know that several students have reported the harassment you've endured since you arrived. That is on us, as much as it is on these boys, and it ends now." Tim's life at Crestwood changed almost overnight. Students who had previously ignored him now offered respectful nods in the hallways. The whispers that followed him were no longer mocking, but admiring. Teachers regarded him with newfound interest, and several suggested he start a martial arts club. Most importantly, the bullying stopped completely. Not just from Rick and his gang, who gave Tim a wide berth upon their return from suspension, but from everyone. The word was out: push the quiet kid too far and you'd pay the price. But Tim found his victory bittersweet. There was satisfaction in standing up for himself, in showing that he wasn't the helpless victim they thought he was. But there was also a profound sadness in the realization that it had come to violence at all. A few weeks later, a girl named Emily Carter approached Tim. She was small, with bright green eyes behind thick glasses, and she had been dealing with her own share of bullying from a group of mean girls in her class. "I heard what you did," she said softly, falling into step beside him as he walked to his locker after school. "With Rick and those guys." Tim nodded, unsure where the conversation was going. "I was wondering," Emily continued, "if maybe you could teach me. Some of what you know, I mean. I don't want to hurt anyone, but I'm tired of being afraid all the time." Tim stopped and looked at her. Really looked. He saw himself a few months ago, scared and alone, enduring abuse because he didn't know how to stop it. But he also saw an opportunity to share Master Choi's teachings in a new way. "It's not about fighting," he said. "Most of the time, just knowing you can defend yourself changes how you act. People sense confidence, even when it's quiet." Emily nodded eagerly. "I understand. I just don't want to feel helpless anymore." "Okay," Tim said, "but we do this the right way. It's not about revenge or getting even. It's about protecting yourself and others who can't protect themselves." Within a month, Tim had started an after-school self-defense club in the gym. Principal Davies not only approved, but provided school funding after seeing how the program was helping students who had been bullied. The club grew steadily, attracting not only victims, but also students genuinely interested in martial arts. Master Choi visited from Seoul for Tim's 15th birthday, and his mother arranged for him to see what Tim had created at Crestwood. After watching a training session, the old master approached his former student, a hint of pride in his usually stern face. "You have learned the most important lesson," Master Choi said in his accented English. "Strength shared becomes greater strength. This is true mastery. Several months later, Rick Hamilton approached Tim after one of the self-defense sessions. The former hockey star had been keeping a low profile since his suspension. His social status significantly diminished after word got out about his defeat. "Can I talk to you?" Rick asked, his voice subdued. Tim nodded, dismissing the group and waiting until they were alone. "I've been thinking about what happened," Rick said, staring at the floor. "About why I did what I did to you." Tim waited silently. "My dad," Rick continued, his voice thick with emotion. "He's always pushed me hard. Nothing I do is ever good enough. When I got to high school, and everyone looked up to me because of hockey, it felt good to have that power, to make other people feel small the way my dad makes me feel small." He looked up at Tim, his eyes glistening. "That doesn't excuse what I did. I know that. But I wanted you to know it wasn't really about you. It was about me feeling powerless and taking it out on someone I thought was weaker." Tim studied the boy who had tormented him for months, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. "What are you going to do about it?" he asked. "I don't know," Rick admitted. "I've been seeing the school counselor. She says I need to find better ways to deal with my anger." Tim was silent for a long moment, then made a decision that surprised them both. "There's room in the club if you're interested. Not as a leader, you'd start at the bottom like everyone else. But if you're serious about changing, about finding better ways to channel what you're feeling, the training might help." Rick's eyes widened. "You'd let me join? After everything I did?" "Master Choi taught me that everyone deserves a chance to be better," Tim said. "But this would be your only chance. You hurt someone in my club, you disrespect the training or use it to intimidate people, and you're out permanently." "I understand," Rick said quickly. "I won't let you down." A year later, Tim stood before a gym filled with over 50 students of all backgrounds. What had begun as a self-defense club had grown into a community of students who supported each other, who had learned that true strength came from lifting each other up. Rick had become one of the club's most dedicated members, his natural athleticism serving him well in training, while his experience with bullying helped him mentor new students struggling with similar problems. He would never be Tim's friend, but he had earned respect through effort and change. As Tim surveyed the group, he remembered the boy who had entered Crestwood a year ago, hiding, enduring harassment. That boy seemed distant now. The session ended with meditation. In the quiet, with young people in peaceful concentration, Tim thought about his journey. Master Choi had been right. Violence should be a last resort. True strength was about protection, and the greatest victories were won without a punch. But he had also learned new truths. Standing up for yourself took courage. The right fight could prevent wrong ones, and bullies can improve if given a chance. After everyone left, Tim cleaned the gym. In the quiet space, surrounded by equipment, he felt purpose. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother, asking if he wanted to invite anyone over. Tim smiled, thinking of friendships, community, and students who no longer feared the halls. He had found something unexpected at Crestwood. He had found belonging, and he had learned that you have to fight for the right to be yourself, but your real strength comes from helping others. 24348